I saw the king die with his mouth full of stolen meat. That image still lives in my mind, clear as the sun on a dry day. The way his eyes bulged, the way his hands clawed at the air. But maybe I'm going too fast. Let me start from the beginning. Our king Omari was once loved. Long ago, he would walk among the people, laugh with us, and listen to our struggles. But power is a tricky thing. The more he took, the less he gave. Soon his laughter became commands, and his promises became lies. Omari's greed was like a fire, growing and destroying everything in its path. He demanded more crops from the farmers, but gave nothing in return. The hunters had to give him their finest meat, even when their own families went hungry. And if anyone complained, these gods would make them regret it. It was the worst during the drought. Our rivers dried up and the land cracked open like old clay. People begged for food, but the king's granaries stayed locked. Only the royal family feasted while we boiled roots and chewed on leaves. I was one of the servants in the palace. My job was to carry the king's food. Every day I would walk past hungry children with bowls of steaming stew and roasted meat. Their eyes followed me, hollow and desperate. I hated that job, but what choice did I have? One night something changed. A group of elders came to the palace. They carried nothing but their voices and their anger. They knelt before the king and begged him to open the granaries. Our children are dying, one of them said. The king only laughed. Your hunger is not my problem, he said, waving them away. I felt shame boil in my chest. I wanted to speak, to do something, but I was too afraid. That's when old Mama Juma, the oldest woman in the village, stood up. She wasn't supposed to be there, but somehow she had followed the elders. Her back was bent, but her voice was strong. You are no king, she said. A real king feeds his people. The room went silent. Omari's face turned dark like a storm cloud. Take her away, he said, but Mama Juma wasn't afraid. She raised her hand and pointed at him. A greedy stomach will choke itself, she said. Her words felt heavy, like they carried something bigger than all of us. The gods dragged her away, but her words stayed in the room. That night, during the king's feast, something strange happened. Omari grabbed a piece of meat, the biggest one on the plate, and stuffed it into his mouth. He chewed and laughed, mocking the elders who had dared to beg. But then he stopped. His laughter turned to choking. His hands clawed at his throat and his eyes grew wide with fear. The room was chaos, people shouting and running, but I just stood there, frozen. The king fell to the ground, his mouth still full of meat, the same food he had taken from us. By morning, the news had spread. Mama Juma's words echoed through the village. A greedy stomach will choke itself. We didn't celebrate his death, but we didn't mourn him either. Instead, we opened the granaries and shared the food. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind us of what we could do together. That's how I remember it. The day the king died and the people rose. Sometimes when the nights are quiet, I think of Mama Juma's voice and the power of simple truths. A greedy stomach will always choke itself.